Vince, another announcement, another delay to the actual completion date or even building date of Princess Alexandra Hospital. Does that concern you?
It hugely concerns me, and I have to say, Michael, it doesn't come as a huge surprise either. I think from day one, we've been, led up the garden path and been given false promises by this town's current MP about the new hospital. I remember just before the 2019 general election, him being very proud, boasting about how he was going to bring a new hospital to Harlow. I at the time was cynical, and we've done a number of interviews where I've remained cynical, and it feels like again it's been moved further back. I'm not surprised by this. I think having had conversations with people, obviously they're looking at a different form of building. The one that they're trying to that they see as being more cost effective, but obviously that in itself is going to cause delays. We know that let's be honest, there's a lot of other issues that this government is, in my view, failing to deal with. Not least the issues with schools. So it does concern me a great deal. We know of the issues that the current PAH is facing. It's literally bursting at the seams. And my heart does generally go out to obviously people who've got loved ones that patients at PAH and some of the staff. And to be fair to people like Michael, and they've put a lot of work into this project, and it just must be so frustrating for them that once again it's been further delayed. But sadly, I'm not surprised.
Why do you use the word "led up the garden path"?
Well, I just feel, there was a very bold promise made in the hustings before the 2019 general election. It was a promise, in fact, that, we're going to bring a new hospital to Harlow, and we're now talking about it being, well, we don't know, do we? We know it's not going to be in 2030, effectively. It's going to be very light at the earliest, the end of that year, if not 2031. So, to make a bold statement, in 2019 that I'm going to bring a new hospital to Harlow, feels at best a little bit misleading.
Speaking of buildings, SFG and other closures this week. A crime occurred. It's not the school's fault, but are you still concerned about where we are? And next week there's going to be a meeting with the relevant minister. What do you hope people will get out of this meeting?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I've always said this, and it just feels like every week there's something else about SFG, and I've had parents speaking to me, some really upset about, generally they just want their children to get that education which they deserve and have a right to, frankly. So first of all, once again, my heart, goes out to them. This is all part of the same issue. Absolutely, it's not their fault that there's been a burglary, but obviously, if the school site was secure, if it was a building rather than a tent, I would suggest that it would be slightly more difficult to burgle. In terms of what I would like to see happen in that meeting, I think that we need the answers, and the answers to the questions that myself and others have been asking for the last 3 months. Who signed off the contract with his particular developer? Who had the final say that the site was secure, and why has it been left to the 11th hour before the school was actually closed? I just hope, and I genuinely, obviously, I've been accused of making politics on this issue, and it would be easy for me to say more issues with that school means more criticism of the current MP and the DfE, which there should be, but I just want children to be back in school now, and I really hope that there are no further delays to that. We know that it's not going to be ideal circumstances being in temporary accommodation, but I really genuinely hope that this is the last delay and those young people are able to get the education not only that they need, but they deserve.
There is also a problem maybe coming down the line that admissions officers at Essex County Council have probably got those figures in front of them right now.
Yeah.
And, there's clearly a lot of Harlow schools, other than it may well be oversubscribed, and that's a problem down the line, isn't it? About there may be maybe dozens and dozens of parents who may be given SFG and may not want it. That's a problem, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously part of the reason that the SFG was open because there was a need for additional school places in Harlow, and absolutely, if you were a parent looking at where you want to send your child next year or the year after, you'd be looking at these issues and saying, well, do I want to send my child to a school that's got temporary buildings? And I think the other thing that, going back to your previous question, that parents should be asking and are asking me, and I don't have the answers, unfortunately, but frankly, the town's MP and the DfE should have these answers, is what is the timeline? What is the timescale for this issue to be dealt with? Because we know there's been, a bit like the hospital, there's been delays, there's been pushback on terms of, when we're going to move from what we've currently got to sort of demountable style classrooms. And I know there's been talk of improving the toilet facilities, which obviously should be welcome. But when are we going to see that building come down? And when are we going to see a permanent building put up? And the reality is that's probably going to, if you look at the hospital as an example, it's going to be years down the line. And clearly parents are going to be thinking, well, that's a long amount of time to not have a permanent building to be educated in. So I understand parents' concerns, and yes, it is another issue that is going to be caused by this problem.
And finally, Chris, it's a cold easterly blowing through Harlow today, and temperature gone right down. And I know where the warm spaces are in Colchester and Saffron Walden and Chelmsford and Southend, but I don't know where the warm spaces are allocated in Harlow. There's been nothing stated, whereas in Essex around there has. Is that a concern for you?
Well, a huge concern. It's something that I know Councillor Kay Morrison raised last year, actually, about needing to get this situation sorted out, and I think she raised it again this year. It feels like the council, our council in Harlow, have been very slow on the uptake on this issue once again. And like you said, next week is likely to be very, very cold. It's cold now, and it's likely to get colder. So it is a real concern for me because, again, as we've had a conversation on this before, the big issue that people are talking to me on the doorstep, again, is the cost of living crisis, is the concerns about, heating their homes through the winter period. And actually, we need to be doing what we can to tackle this issue. I've got a question in for the cabinet meeting next week, but that may well be too late because that's Thursday. I know that my deputy, Councillor Edwards, has been asking questions behind the scenes on this. But actually, what needs to happen is the council needs to advertise these warm spaces, whether they are warm spaces they are providing, or they are warm spaces provided by other organisations, which is absolutely fine and good and proper. But I don't know why we seem to be on the back foot on this issue again. And it sort of, was it the best kept secret? I don't know why, really. I think that, we need to be advertising this issue. So that's something I will be calling for, absolutely.
And meanwhile, and very, very finally, meanwhile, the warm spaces in people's homes may not be warm spaces because they can't afford to put their heating on, and looking at the energy bills going up. A lot of people really didn't get to the grips of an autumn statement that they can see their bills in January. Is that true?
Well, absolutely, and I've obviously sent you a statement, with regard to the autumn statement, and I think actually the reality of that, there was very little in that to really support working people in Harlow, and actually it was an autumn statement that took with one hand and gave with the other, and actually I think, as you say, people in Harlow, hard-working people in Harlow, are still going to be finding that they are going to struggle to pay their bills over the winter period, and a lot of that has, I have to say, has been down to 13 years of a government that hasn't had a plan, that has made bad decisions, and we've seen, the growth forecast once again lower than was predicted, even in March of this year. And I think, I'm obviously going to say this as a Labour parliamentary candidate, but I think people in Harlow recognise that we need change. We need a competent government, a government that can bring back that stability in the economy, and will actually start to put together a real plan of action to get growth back in the economy, and actually to look at how we can support people's lives. And I think for me, my biggest criticism of the Conservative government, and perhaps to an extent the Conservatives in Harlow, is a lot of their approach is about buildings, and absolutely it's important that we build, and that's why I'm delighted that, as I said to you in the previous interview, that the Labour Party nationally are talking about a real programme of building, and not just piecemeal, but a real building houses. But it also needs to be, in my view, a person-centred approach. We need to look at how people are struggling and how we can support them to make their lives better. And that, for me, is one of my key principles moving forward. How do we support people? How do we give them that aspiration back? How do we back people in Harlow?